Hey guys, if you're in the market for a new phone, it can be a little confusing and overwhelming to know exactly what you're paying long term. Is it better to just buy it outright, to buy it used, to buy it through an installment plan, or to subscribe to something through your carrier where you get a new phone every year or two automatically? Well, I made a calculator to help you make that decision. Let's explore that together. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Here at Save & Green, I crunch the numbers and look at the science to help you make informed decisions that help your wallet and the planet at the same time. And today we're looking at phones. Now, in a previous video, I had basically discussed what the consequences of our cycle of consumption are having on not only our bottom line, but also on the planet. Our ecological footprint for e-waste is piling up dramatically year over year, and it has quite a lot to do with our purchasing habits, particularly with cell phones. And if you want to learn more about that with specific emphasis on the e-waste ecosystem, as well as the right to repair movement here in the US and abroad, I will link to that video up here. But this is a more general kind of 10,000 foot view approach, looking at phone depreciation over time, where you can basically look at any basic phone and by researching how it depreciates to figure out what the true cost of ownership is, so that you can basically compare apples to apples what you're really paying over the long term. So let's look at the spreadsheet and see how things go. So this is the Save & Green Phone Buyer's Guide. And this will basically break down your true cost of ownership over 5 years. And there's a few sections to the spreadsheet that I'd like to go over with you quickly. The first is the true cost of the phone. So basically, you can type in anything you want in this box. Let's say $850 is what we have here, because that's the price of a new 128 gigabyte iPhone or a 256 Galaxy S21, which are the two basic flagship phones, the iPhone 12 and the S21, available now in March 2021. But this will basically be adjusted to whatever you want. If you want to buy the top of the line iPhone 12 Pro Max or whatever, what's it? It's $1299. Boom, you can type it in there and you can see everything changes on the spreadsheet. But let's get back to $850 for a second. And this is the depreciation. This is critical. Now, phones depreciate over time like anything else. And the Frugal Analyst has a discussion on with his own analysis and his own experimentation based on how many months since the release of a product, how much the resale value on eBay, for example, products have depreciated. So basically what I did is I just basically Googled phone depreciation and found a few good resources. One of them is this website here, which is the Bank My Cell website. And you can see that basically for the first year of ownership, iPhones depreciate about 23% and Androids lose about 45% of their value. And that's comparable to the 2-year depreciation of a typical iPhone. That confirms Ryan's analysis that iPhones actually retain their value over time a little bit better than Android. Now, both iPhones and Android do lose value over time, but it's actually interesting because they lose at different rates. And it depends on the type of Android phone that you have in particular, whereas the iPhone ecosystem is a little bit more stable across different iPhone subtypes. So for example, all iOS devices are grouped together. You can see that in year 1, we have 100% of value. You lose somewhere between 20 and 30% after year 1, 40 and 50% at year 2, so on and so forth up until year 4, where all these phones basically have lost substantial amounts of value, but the iPhone retains the most value. Now, this light green versus the dark green is basically a Android flagship versus a budget Android phone. And you can see that the slopes of these lines, or the curves, are actually relatively similar. Yes, the flagships do retain their percentages a little bit higher, but it's not that much. Like for example, at 3 years, you're looking at just under 80% of value loss versus just under 90%, about maybe 83%, for a budget Android phone. So yeah, you will lose a little bit more over time with a budget phone, but the phone itself costs significantly less, so it's something to think about. Now, if we go back to the spreadsheet, we see that the phone depreciation is in this column here. And this will basically say that after the first year, 25% loss or 75% value of $850, and you can see kind of how the formulas basically work out, will be determinative of what the residual value is. Now, the trade-in value is about 50 to 60% of what the resale value would be if you just went to eBay or sold it outright on OfferUp, for example. And that's because, like with anything else, like trading in a used car, you're actually going to get less value on the dollar than you would when you're trading it in for a new product directly through the dealer or directly through your carrier, for example, or through Apple. So here, let's look at, for example, let's say we were to get like an iPhone XR, which is now a few years old. I think it came out in 2018. An iPhone XR right now through Apple, if you trade this in, and this is similar for Verizon and other AT&T programs as well, you can get up to $220 back for an iPhone XR in good condition. Now, if you compare that to what it is on eBay, you're looking at $320. So it's about 60%, give or take, of the residual value as a trade-in versus if you were to sell it directly through a third-party site like eBay. So that's where this value comes in. You can see the proportionate changes here. Now, this first column is the adjusted monthly cost if you bought the phone and basically kept it for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, etc. So it'll only be $14 a month over 60 months if you bought an $850 phone outright. So that's this general box. Now these are the retail programs here. So let's say that you signed up for a new program and you want to add a phone on and you don't want to pay it off right away. So is it actually better to just pay it off over 24 months like you can do with Verizon or T-Mobile, or over 30 months, no interest with AT&T? So basically that's what the schedule would be in this scenario. So if you bought a phone over 30 months at $850, you'd be paying $28 and change every month. Pay a little bit more over 24 months because you have a shorter period to pay off the phone. And if you basically renewed this every single year, what would you pay in your annual cost after year 1, year 2, year 3? That's where these columns are here. So you can say that if you basically bought a phone, paid it off over 30 months, and then as soon as that contract ended, you basically signed up for a new phone at the same value, what would that estimated cost be over that period of time? And that's this value here. And you can see that, yes, the 24-month schedule is a little bit more expensive because you're paying phones off faster. So you're paying a higher monthly rate every time. Now, this down here is the 5-year ownership cost, and this is where things really get interesting because this basically looks at a few different scenarios. One is buying a phone outright every interval of time, every 12 months, 24 months, etc., without reselling it. Let's say you break it or you lose it. This is kind of worst case scenario, and that's obviously why this is red and incredibly expensive. The second is whether you buy and resell the phone based on taking full advantage of the maximal resale cost at any given period of time. So let's say you sold it after your first year, you'd be getting this whole value back every single time. So over a 5-year period, you'd actually be able to trade in your phone 4 times. And that's where this value comes right here. That's how you can interpret this graph. Now, 30-month installments, this is related to this section here through your retailer or carrier. This is basically a payment plan. Now, the reason why you can't trade your phone in after 1 or 2 years on a 30-month payment plan is because you haven't paid off your phone yet. You can after 2 years, of course, on a 24-month payment plan, and that's why this cell is populated. And you can see that there's actual relative parity between whether you buy and resale and whether you just pay it off in installments. And some of these, for example, paying it off over 30 months can actually save you some money as opposed to buying it outright and reselling because you're not paying the full cost of the phone right up front. So let's say at your 4th year, right at month 48, I'm buying a brand new phone, whereas I'm just paying another monthly payment on month 48 and 49. So that's why these are lower than the upfront resale cost. And obviously down here at year 5, assuming you kept that same phone for all 5 years, the cheapest option would be to just buy and resell it than it would be to pay your installment plans for the other reason. That phone's completely paid for at year 5, whereas you're still paying monthly installments for the other 2 30 and 24-month scenarios. Now this is the percent savings as opposed to this column here, which is a subscription program where your carrier gives you a new phone every year or 2, assuming that you've paid off 50% of the equity in the phone. So that would mean after 15 months on a 30-year plan or 1 year in a 24-month plan, you can just get a shiny new phone. So how much would that be? Well, that assumes a few things. One, it's a $5 a month surcharge for AT&T and Verizon, and for every device upgrade, you pay another $30 just to kind of get a new SIM card or whatever. So basically, if you assume all that, how much are you saving? Well, obviously, the longer you keep your phone, the more you're saving over the subscription plan. So this subscription plan really makes sense if you really wanted a new phone every year. And for that reason, you're paying the smallest premium, in this case, only 20%, for an additional cost of $420 over the same experience, mind you, if you bought a new phone and then sold it yourself. That's because, again, the trade-in values are less through your carrier. So just interesting how that math ultimately plays out. this graph over here, this 5-year cost to own, shows you that the trend decreases of your ownership the longer you keep your phone. If you buy only, yeah, you're paying a boatload if you get a new phone every year. If you are on a 2-year cycle, you can see that the 24-month installments and the buy and sell are actually equal. You can see that over here, if you kept your phone for 3 years, your 30-month payment cycle and your buy and sell are actually fairly equal. But you can see that at 4 years, and just how this math works out, you're paying a little bit more on this particular cycle if you bought and sold your phone than you would if you were paying a subscription, and then things again normalize at the end of year 5. Now, let's say that your phone depreciates a little bit more. Let's say that instead of an iPhone, you have an Android and it decreases 45%. Well, now you see that these graphs change. Now you see that it's actually relatively more expensive to buy and sell your phone in the first couple of years than would be to just buy a 24-month payment plan. So for Android phones, it may make more sense to actually buy it through the carrier as an installment than it is to pay for it outright. That's because the yearly depreciation is so high for Android phones. Now, the last scenario that I wanted to look at is whether you straight up bought used, maybe a year old, and then kept it for a year or 2. So then you'd be dealing with a 1-year-old phone. If you sold it after 1 year, you'd get the resale value for really a 2-year-old phone, because that's the true age of the phone. And that's where these calculations come from. So this basically says, what's the 5-year ownership of a 1-year-old phone that you were trading every year, meaning you were getting the buyback equivalent of a 2-year-old phone. In that case, even getting a new phone every year that happens to be a year old, you're paying $1,300 as opposed to, $2,300, which is a 45% savings. Now notice how this math turns out. That's exactly the same amount of the depreciation. For example, if I bump this back up to 35, that's what that becomes. That's a net savings of $750 in this scenario, and you can see how the prices goes up. If I kept that same 1-year-old phone, but in this case kept it now for 2 years or 3 years or 4 years, what's my total ownership cost? Well, you can see here that it is, again, significantly less, and you can see how these values correlate. Now, let's say that you bought a 2-year-old phone straight up. Well, look at that. You're saving that much more money. You're saving 58%, again, basically the depreciation over 2 years than you would over 1. So you're saving all that depreciation cost on the front end. And that's why buying used can actually save you so much money. Well, all right, so what's the bottom line? Well, if you're an iPhone user, then buying a phone through a 30-month installment program is not a bad way to go, but definitely try to keep it for at least 3 years. Even better, try to find a 1 or 2-year-old iPhone and then keep it for an additional 2 or 3 years. You're going to save a lot of money in the end if you go that route. If you're Android, there's really no major benefit to buying a flagship or a cheap phone as far as depreciation goes. So you're going to probably save more money in the long run, a lot more money, if you buy a cheaper, maybe mid-tier Android phone. Furthermore, it probably makes sense to just buy an Android phone through an installment program, since you'll be paying less over time in the long run as well. Now, in no scenario did it make sense, whether you're buying a phone every year or upgrading through a subscription program, to actually use the subscription program. It's still cheaper to buy a phone and sell it every year if that's your bag. Now, in my previous video, I talked about at great length why that practice is not good for ultimately the environment, and this chart proves that it's also way more expensive than it needs to be. There's very little reason to get a new phone every year, probably every 2 years, but nonetheless, you can see just based on how these numbers play out, which scenario may be best for you. Obviously, the longer you keep your phone, the better for the planet, the more you're going to save. And if you can get into the used market for refurbished or secondhand phones, you'll save even more money in the long run. So I hope this was helpful. Thank you so much for checking it out. I will provide the spreadsheet in the description below, so feel free to download it and edit and make any comments or changes so that it makes sense for you. And if you have any questions about how the numbers were programmed into the spreadsheet, I'll be happy to answer them in the comments below. So thanks again. I will see you in the next video. Bye.